We are back. Today I want to talk about settling. Not to do it, how you know you are. I think we all kind of know when we are, but sometimes we're just not really aware. And I want to go over some points that talk about just some signs that'll come up that you are settling in a relationship, and also some of the things that we might think about why we need to settle into something that isn't working, and why we don't need to do that, and why it's really important that we don't do that for ourselves, and actually even if kids are involved. So, first, the signs that you might be settling for something that isn't working for you. First, I'll go into kind of like the beginning of a relationship. If you're feeling a lot of anxiety, or someone makes you feel a lot of anxiety around the connection, you just don't feel like you're getting what you're like it's even in the sense of maybe you're over giving, or you're giving a lot and you feel like this person's not really, kind of always has one foot out, and it's tripping up that anxiety level in somebody who's maybe not even in an anxious attachment style. It's just, it causes anxiety because you're just never sure where you stand in the relationship. You're always wanting more, or feeling like there's something missing there. And then something that, point two, that would go along with that is just never feeling like you can be your full out self. Like, and I don't mean if you're, like if you're having overreactions emotionally or something like that. But I mean, like, you're not able to just like be how you are and express the things you want to express. You feel like you have to hide aspects of your personality, or in the sense of, like, for instance, you don't feel like you could say your opinion about something freely without the person being extremely judgmental, or for instance, maybe even something like you're hiding silly things like you don't want to admit that you like a Taylor Swift song or something. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Like, it can be as simple as that, but stuff like that starts getting, it's like that is a sign of something that's kind of surface level relationship. So you're walking on eggshells in a way. Like, that's a big point right there. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells in your relationship, then you probably are settling for something that's in the long term not going to work well, or that's a sign of shrinking yourself, which is another point. Maybe you're intellectually shrinking yourself, or you're shrinking yourself in the way you want to express yourself, either emotionally, or maybe with, maybe you feel like you can't dress the way you want to dress because this person, maybe you want to change something, like you want to start doing something else, or change your body, and you want to start going to the gym, and you don't feel like you're able to, like, move and make moves and change and grow because this person wants everything to stay the same. That's a sign of that you're settling. Another sign is that internally you're feeling angry or resentful. Because anytime that we're feeling anger or resentment in something, that means that we're either overextending or holding something about ourselves back. And, this has happened to me where I, would overgive in a relationship. And then I'd start feeling resentful because I didn't feel like the person appreciated me or appreciated what I was doing. And, honestly, they didn't ask me to do those things, but I wasn't feeling like I was giving, like it ended up being, like it felt like certain things were expected, but then not appreciated. And I'm like, well, I just can't do this. And so, yeah, I couldn't settle for that. And so I had to end that relationship. It's been more than one relationship that has had that dynamic in it. And I had to realize that that's not a dynamic that I care to get into anymore. And I now try to identify that early on when I'm more in the dating stage. And there are a lot of different things that will come up where you feel like you're settling. If you feel like you're just kind of like low grade, never happy in the relationship. Like there's nothing wrong, but there's nothing also that makes it feel something is off. Like there's this constant off feeling in the relationship. It could be from like disconnect in relating and conversations, where you feel like you're just not, like you're always. I once had this experience with a person. Now, I didn't get into a long-term relationship with them, but I felt like every time we would get together, like I was retrying to get to know them every time. Like it never set. It never seemed to have the kind of flow that you really need to have with someone. It was just like every time it was kind of like, okay, we're starting from ground zero again, and it just didn't connect. And this disconnected feeling in communication and relating is a big sign that you're settling. So now I want to talk about how to just move on from that and be okay with, because sometimes it feels like, okay, so people who watch the channel know that I'm, in midlife. I'm 50 years old and I have never been married, and I've had a few significant relationships, but nothing that has endured. And I am a classic example of somebody who hasn't settled. And why I think it's important for me not to, and that I think that I'm in a better space now than I would have been, and that I just, wasn't really choosing the right things. However, here's what's really important to recognize is that it is better to be on your own and have a good life than it is to be in union with someone that is completely off. Because here's the thing, that person is taking up the space for you to find someone who is a good fit for you, and you are taking up the space of somebody who might want to be with them. So I think that it's hard to break things off, especially if you've been with someone for a while and you realize that it's just not working. But if you can look at the fact that they're taking up the space for the right person for you and you're taking up the space for the right person for them, then you realize that it's not so bad to break it off. And in the case of people who have children, I know it's a lot more complicated. However, that your kids aren't dumb, and that energy that is happening, especially if there's arguing, which is another sign that I didn't mention before, if you just cannot seem to get along. And I'm not saying that there aren't always disagreements, but if you're constantly arguing, constantly bickering, and you have kids, that is not good for your kids to be around. And I will say that, it is much better to co-parent with somebody while you're not together sometimes. It's better for the kids and it's better for you, because then you can reevaluate the relationship in the sense of, okay, now we're going to co-parent and we're not going to, you may find that you're able to not fight as much because you're only, and if you do have something volatile, then you set it up, obviously, in a way where you're only talking or dealing with that person in reference to your children. But many people are able to have a better, more amicable relationship when they realize that it's not working and they split up and co-parent their kids still, and are able to figure out the visitation and all of that kind of stuff. And are able to, some people are even friends. But never settle, because there is something better. And I don't mean, because this can get into toxic behaviors where, somebody is, I'm not talking about the whole thing, there's someone better, there's like the whole, swiping culture. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is someone being a good fit in your life, and somebody who you feel attraction toward, somebody who you feel like you have great conversation, who you are on the same path with, who fits lifestyle-wise. So these are the components that I'm talking about that we can't settle on. And, I just saying that, I didn't write that down, but this is an important one. So chemistry is defined a couple of different ways sometimes, but the chemistry that I'm going to refer to right now is attraction chemistry, right? You have to have a pretty high level of that in order for something to last. And so you are settling if you are not attracted to your partner. And I think that's probably the reason that it didn't come to mind right away, is I think a lot of people, that's where they really know they're not compatible right off the bat, where that just comes in. And I know that there are times in a relationship where you may be a little less attracted, or, there's ebbs and flows in a long-term relationship. So, okay, yes. But I would say, and I have heard other people talk about this too, that are in the dating, relationship coaching space, say that it needs to be around a 8 level, because if you're scales 8 out of 10 or whatever. But I would agree with that personally. Like, I really need to be highly attracted to the person that I'm with, and I think that a lot of us do. And yeah, looks fade and all of that stuff, yes, but people that I've been attracted to, that, like, I still know in life, like, I look at them now and I'm like, yeah, they're still attractive. Like they still, I still can see what I liked about them. And so it's interesting, like no matter how much age or, how much time goes by and how someone ages and all of that, it's like you can still see that sparkle and that spark. And sometimes you'll see pictures of, I've seen a few memes lately online of like a couple in their 20s and then them now. And you can see that they still have that attraction, and that it's actually kind of, and it's deepened in a whole other way, but you can see that there's still a sprightliness there, And so I think that's important to recognize, that it is important to have all of these kind of components sit in place, and that settling just, it's not a good option for anybody. It's not fair to the other person. Like I said, that's just so, it's the worst thing in the world. How would you feel if someone was settling for you? I wouldn't want that. In fact, I always talk really early on in relationships about, hey, let's check in to see where we are on a regular basis, to see if we're still going the same way. And because I don't want to stand in anyone's way of, I don't want it to be someone that someone's settling for. Yikes, yuck, gross. No thanks. I want to be with somebody who thinks I'm the bee's knees and who I think is the bee's knees as well, because that's kind of what it's, that's baseline to me. That's where, that's where it has to start. It needs to start in a really, I'm not saying that it can't grow from a friendship or whatever, but I'm saying that baseline, it has to be pretty strong. And, there are a lot of signs. There's probably tons more of what it looks like to settle. But I think that the points that I've laid out are pretty strong for you to look at and recognize. And if you're having a problem recognizing things, I would suggest writing a list. Because sometimes, I think we know, once we're writing a list, we probably know that we're settling. Because here's the other thing, is you could be settling, but you could be like 10 level attracted to somebody. They could like tick all your boxes, but here's the thing. You also need to look at their behavior and see if they're settling for you. And if they're not, meeting you where you want to be met and meeting your needs in a way that is healthy. Because I don't think that your partner should fulfill every dang thing. They can't. That's not fair either. But writing a list sometimes gets that extra clarity that you may have missed. Like writing down, hey, they show up for me here, but they don't show up for me here. And you can have conversations about that. But like, is it something that feels like a deal breaker? Like, oh, they're kind of late all the time, but when it comes to something important, they're absolutely there, and they have, showed up for me over and over, so okay, one might cancel out the other. But then you can also just look at, like the other stuff I talked about, like, am I feeling really anxious? Am I wanting more all the time? Am I feeling really unsatisfied in this or restless all the time? Am I angry or resentful? And about what? And so you can start writing a list if you feel like you might be settling, and it can help you get some clarity around that. So I'm really hoping that this information today kind of helps you navigate that if you feel like you might be settling. And the biggest reason not to settle is because there is a right fit for you, and it is better to be on your own than it is to be taking up the space in a relationship that somebody could find something else, and then also having someone take up the space so you can't find something else. And if you like this content, if you have any additional ideas or comments about this subject or anything you'd like to see in the future, go ahead and pop that below in the comments section. And I will be here next Friday and the next Friday and the next Friday. And until then, I'll see you next time. Go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and the little bell notification so you know when I'm making a new video. Have a good one. See you next week. Bye.